The vastness of the ocean has always been a realm of wonder and fear. To some, it represents freedom and endless possibilities. To others, it is a desolate void where mysteries fester and thrive. For centuries, sailors have shared whispered tales of ghost ships, cursed waters, and supernatural forces that haunt the open seas. Among these legends lies the story of the Elysian Horizon, a luxury yacht with a history as murky as the depths it once sailed. This tale is not merely about a vessel, it is about one man's descent into obsession, a haunting legacy, and the price of uncovering truths that should remain hidden. The morning was unusually still. The Pacific Ocean lay like a sheet of glass, reflecting the overcast sky above. Daniel Hayes, a seasoned fisherman with decades of experience, found the stillness unsettling. His small trawler, the Mariner's Resolve, bobbed gently in the water as he prepared for another day of casting nets. It was then that he saw it, a silhouette in the distance, faint against the gray horizon. At first, Daniel dismissed it as a passing vessel, perhaps a yacht returning to shore. But as the minutes passed, the figure didn't move. It drifted aimlessly, untethered by wind or current. Intrigued, Daniel steered his boat closer. As the shape grew clearer, unease settled in his chest. The vessel was a luxury yacht, its once pristine hull now streaked with grime and salt. Its sails hung limply, torn and weathered, as though the wind itself had abandoned them. Daniel hailed the yacht with his radio, his voice steady despite the strange chill in the air. "This is the Mariner's Resolve. Is anyone aboard?" "Over." Silence. He tried again, louder this time, but the only response was static. Against his better judgment, Daniel decided to board the vessel. He tied his trawler to its side and climbed aboard, his boots echoing hollowly against the deck. The scene before him was unnervingly normal, yet deeply wrong. The yacht was eerily clean, no sign of a struggle, no damage to indicate abandonment. A pair of shoes sat neatly by the door to the main cabin. Inside, a table was set for breakfast, complete with porcelain plates and silver cutlery. The only signs of decay were the food remnants, long dried and brittle, and a thin layer of dust that coated every surface. Daniel's steps led him to the helm, where he found the yacht's navigation instruments still functional. The compass needle, however, spun wildly, defying logic. Nearby, a captain's log lay open, its pages damp but legible. The entries were sparse, written in hurried, uneven handwriting. One entry caught Daniel's attention: "Something watches us. At night, we hear her song. It's not the wind, it's never the wind." His breath hitched as he read the words aloud, their weight sinking into him like a stone. The most chilling discovery came in the captain's quarters. Sitting atop a polished wooden desk was a leather-bound journal. Its cover was plain, save for a single embossed symbol, a circle surrounded by jagged lines, reminiscent of the sun. As Daniel flipped through the pages, he found entries that painted a disturbing picture of paranoia and fear. One passage read, "We cannot leave. The ocean keeps pulling us back. She is here, in the water, watching, waiting." Daniel's heart pounded as he felt a sudden drop in temperature. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. A faint creak sounded behind him, like the groan of old wood under strain. Turning abruptly, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the cabin's mirror. At first, it seemed normal, but as he stared, it began to warp. His face elongated, his eyes sunken and hollow. Behind him, a shadow flickered, a figure standing just beyond the threshold of the room. He spun around, but the space was empty. His breathing came in shallow gasps as he clutched the journal to his chest. Something was deeply wrong with this yacht. Fighting the urge to flee, Daniel took a final sweep of the cabin, his every sense heightened. He noticed faint scratches on the walls, too deliberate to be accidental. They formed patterns he couldn't decipher, symbols that seemed to hum with a faint, unseen energy. Rushing back to his trawler, Daniel cast off quickly, his hands trembling as he untied the ropes. As the Elysian horizon faded into the mist, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching him leave. Back aboard his own vessel, he placed the journal on the table and sat down, trying to steady his thoughts. The yacht was no ordinary ship. It was a vessel of secrets, its empty corridors and forgotten cabins hiding more than mere memories. That night, anchored safely near shore, Daniel couldn't sleep. The events of the day replayed in his mind, each detail sharpening into clarity. He decided to examine the journal further, hoping to make sense of what he had experienced. As he opened it, a strange smell wafted up, a mix of salt water and something metallic, like blood. The words on the pages seemed to shift under his gaze, rearranging themselves into new sentences. She knows you now. She will find you. The words sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Slamming the journal shut, he locked it in a drawer and poured himself a stiff drink. But as the night wore on, he couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The shadows in his cabin seemed to stretch and move, and the faint sound of humming reached his ears, soft, melodic, and hauntingly beautiful. It wasn't the wind. It was never the wind. The journal sat on Daniel's table like an anchor to the past, its weathered leather cover seemingly pulsing with an unspoken energy. The fisherman had always been a practical man, someone who dismissed ghost stories as fanciful ramblings of the superstitious. But the events aboard the Elysian Horizon gnawed at his mind. He couldn't deny what he had seen, or, more troublingly, what he had felt. Something was deeply wrong with that yacht, and it was now tangled in his thoughts like a net catching a thrashing fish. Determined to make sense of the journal, Daniel began flipping through its entries with greater focus. The writing was erratic, as though penned by someone teetering on the edge of madness. The early pages described mundane details about the yacht's voyage, a family outing meant to explore the Pacific's untouched beauty. The Callahans, a wealthy and reclusive family, had embarked 6 months earlier with no apparent intention of returning anytime soon. They had been last seen at a marina near San Diego, their departure unremarkable save for the grandeur of the yacht itself. But as Daniel read further, the entries grew darker. One described strange occurrences shortly after the yacht left port. The nights are unnervingly quiet. The crew says it's nothing, but I feel watched. The water seems to move against the current, as if it has a mind of its own. Another entry mentioned whispers in the wind, voices faint yet unmistakable. She sings to us at night, one line read, a melody I can't forget, no matter how hard I try. Unable to sleep, Daniel decided to dig deeper into the yacht's history. The next morning, he visited the local library, a modest building nestled near the harbor. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Abernathy, raised an eyebrow at his inquiry. The Elysian Horizon, you say? That name's familiar, but not in a good way. She retrieved an archive box filled with old newspapers and maritime records. As Daniel sifted through the documents, a chilling picture began to emerge. The Elysian Horizon had a history marred by tragedy. Before the Callahans, it had belonged to a venture capitalist named Robert Mallory, who reportedly drowned after falling overboard during a storm. Witnesses claimed they heard Mallory arguing with someone moments before his death, though no one else had been on deck. Before Mallory, the yacht had changed hands multiple times, each owner meeting an untimely end, heart attacks, drownings, unexplained disappearances. This yacht has been cursed for decades, Mrs. Abernathy whispered, leaning closer to Daniel. The sailors here call it the Siren's embrace. They say it's not just a ship, it's a trap. The mention of a siren struck a chord with Daniel. He recalled the journal's cryptic warnings and the haunting melody he'd heard that night aboard the yacht. Determined to learn more, he sought out local fishermen, many of whom were reluctant to speak. One grizzled old mariner, Captain Lou, finally relented after several rounds of whiskey at the harbor's dive bar. You've seen her, haven't you? Lou asked, his voice gravelly. The woman in the water? Daniel hesitated before nodding. Lou leaned in, lowering his voice to a near whisper. She's no ordinary ghost. She's been here longer than any of us can remember. Some say she's a spirit of the sea, a guardian of its secrets. Others think she's a victim, a woman who died in these waters and cursed those who trespass. Either way, she doesn't forgive. The conversation left Daniel shaken but resolute. He needed answers, real answers. Against his better judgment, he decided to return to the Elysian Horizon. This time, he equipped himself with a flashlight, a camera, and a voice recorder. If the yacht held any clues, he would document them. Boarding the yacht again felt like stepping into another world. The air was heavier, the silence more oppressive. Daniel turned on his flashlight and made his way below deck, where the shadows seemed to writhe like living things. He reached the galley and noticed something he had missed before: faint, rust-colored stains on the floor, leading toward the engine room. Following the trail, Daniel discovered a compartment he hadn't noticed during his first visit. Inside was a collection of artifacts, objects that seemed out of place on a modern yacht. There was an antique compass, its needle spinning erratically, a waterlogged locket engraved with the initials ML, and a small wooden music box. The box was delicate, its surface carved with intricate patterns of waves and stars. Against his better judgment, Daniel wound the mechanism and opened the lid. The melody that played was hauntingly beautiful, yet deeply unsettling. It was the same tune he had heard in his dreams, the one that had lingered in the corners of his mind. As the music played, Daniel felt a presence behind him. Turning slowly, he saw her, a pale, translucent figure with long, flowing hair and eyes like the deep ocean. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Yet Daniel understood her message as clearly as if she had spoken aloud: "You should not have returned." The flashlight flickered, and the air grew colder. Daniel stumbled back, his heart racing. The figure vanished, but her presence lingered. The yacht itself seemed to pulse with life, the walls groaning and the floorboards creaking as though in protest. Grabbing the artifacts, Daniel fled to the deck, desperate to escape. But the yacht's layout had changed. Hallways led to dead ends, doors opened to empty voids. It was as though the yacht was actively working to keep him there. When Daniel finally made it back to his boat, the sun was beginning to set. Exhausted and terrified, he cast off and sped toward shore, vowing never to return. Yet even as he reached the safety of the harbor, he felt no relief. The music box had somehow followed him, its haunting melody faintly audible over the sound of the waves. The nights that followed Daniel's return from the yacht were far from restful. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her, the woman from the depths. Her pale, translucent figure stood at the edge of his vision, her haunting melody threading through his dreams. Though he would wake drenched in sweat, the tune lingered, as if it had been imprinted on his very soul. The once comforting sounds of the ocean outside his home now felt like a threat, each wave carrying her song closer to him. The music box had become the center of his growing paranoia. He didn't remember bringing it back, but there it sat on his kitchen table, its polished wood gleaming under the dim light. No matter how many times he tried to discard it, throwing it into the sea, locking it in a drawer, even smashing it with a hammer, it always reappeared, intact and playing its cursed melody. It was as if the box were bound to him, a physical manifestation of the yacht's sinister grasp. Desperate for answers, Daniel revisited the journal, hoping to find some way to break the spell. His hands trembled as he turned the pages. The once legible script had begun to blur, the ink smearing into strange symbols he couldn't comprehend. Yet one line stood out, written in bold, jagged letters: "Her call is eternal. To hear it is to be hers forever." The legend of the Siren. Unable to decipher the journal further, Daniel turned to the old mariner, Captain Lou, who had previously warned him about the Siren. Lou was reluctant to speak again, his expression dark and shadowed. After much persuasion, he finally relented. "The Siren's call isn't just a legend," Lou began, his voice low and gravelly. "It's a curse as old as the sea itself. She was once a woman, or so the story goes, a victim of betrayal and despair. Her lover, a sailor, promised to return to her but never did. Grief drove her to the cliffs, where she cast herself into the ocean. But the sea didn't claim her, it transformed her. She became a spirit of vengeance, luring sailors to their doom with her song." Daniel listened intently, his pulse quickening with each word. Lou's tale matched the fragments he'd read in the journal and the whispers he'd heard from the townsfolk. But the mariner's voice grew more ominous as he continued. "The Siren doesn't just take lives, she takes souls. Those who hear her song are marked. They're drawn to her, no matter how hard they fight it. The only way to escape is to appease her, to give her what she wants." "And what does she want?" Daniel asked, though he dreaded the answer. Lou hesitated, his gaze fixed on the table. "She wants you to listen. To surrender. Once you do, she'll take you to her domain, and there's no coming back." The siren's influence deepens. That night, Daniel felt the siren's pull stronger than ever. The melody of the music box seemed louder, its notes reverberating through his small house. Shadows danced across the walls, forming shapes that resembled waves crashing against rocks. In the mirror, his reflection no longer matched his movements. His lips curled into a smile he wasn't making, and his eyes glimmered with an otherworldly light. Unable to bear it any longer, Daniel grabbed the box and hurled it into the fireplace. Flames engulfed the wood, the melody distorting into a high-pitched wail. For a moment, he thought he'd won. But then the flames turned a sickly blue, and the box emerged unscathed, its tune now more haunting than ever. Exhausted and terrified, Daniel knew he couldn't face this alone. He reached out to Dr. Meredith Klein, an occult historian he'd heard about through Captain Lou Klein, specialized in maritime folklore and had written extensively about supernatural phenomena tied to the sea. When Daniel showed her the journal and the artifacts he'd recovered, her face paled. "This symbol," she said, pointing to the embossed circle on the journal's cover, "is ancient. It represents the siren's eternal cycle, the binding of her victims to the sea." She examined the music box, her hands trembling slightly. "This is a vessel of her power. Destroying it won't work because it's tied to her essence. But perhaps it can be sealed." Daniel's hope flickered. "How?" Klein hesitated. "There are rituals. Dangerous ones. They require a confrontation, a direct encounter with the siren. If you can return the box to her and resist her call, it might break the connection. The siren's domain beckons." Klein's words filled Daniel with dread. The idea of returning to the yacht, of facing the siren in her domain, was almost too much to bear. But he knew he had no choice. The siren's influence was spreading, it wasn't just haunting him anymore. The fishermen at the harbor spoke of strange sightings, phantom ships appearing in the mist, a woman's voice echoing across the water. Even Captain Lou admitted he'd started hearing the song in his dreams. With Klein's guidance, Daniel prepared for the ritual. He gathered supplies, candles, salt, and a talisman inscribed with protective symbols. But as he boarded his trawler and set a course for the Elysian Horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. The yacht appeared in the distance, shrouded in fog. As Daniel approached, the melody of the music box grew louder, drowning out the sound of the waves. The air grew colder, and the sky darkened, though it was barely past noon. Stepping aboard, he felt the yacht come alive around him. The walls seemed to breathe, and the deck creaked as if in greeting. This time, the siren didn't wait. She appeared before him, her figure more solid than before. Her hair moved like tendrils in the water, and her eyes bore into his soul. She didn't speak, but her presence conveyed a single command: "Come to me." Daniel gripped the music box tightly, his resolve wavering as a song filled his mind. Memories flashed before his eyes, his childhood, his first fishing trip, the faces of those he'd loved and lost. The siren's song twisted these memories, turning them into visions of despair and loneliness. But deep within, Daniel found a spark of resistance. He remembered Klein's words: "Resist her call. She feeds on your fear." Summoning all his strength, he opened the music box and hurled it into the water. The siren shrieked, her voice splitting the air. The yacht trembled violently, its walls cracking and its lights flickering. As the box sank beneath the waves, Daniel felt the siren's grip weaken. Her form dissolved into mist, and the yacht fell silent once more. But as Daniel turned to leave, a chilling realization struck him. The box had vanished, but her song still echoed faintly in his mind. When Daniel returned to the harbor, the world felt unchanged, yet he could sense the weight of the siren's lingering influence. The sky appeared darker, the air heavier, and even the waves lapping against the dock seemed to whisper her haunting melody. His victory aboard the Elysian Horizon felt hollow. Though he had cast the music box into the depths, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had only postponed the inevitable. The faint echo of her song now lived in his mind, a ceaseless hum in the background of his every thought. It was subtle at first, like the distant chime of a wind bell. But the longer he ignored it, the louder it became, growing into a chorus of overlapping voices that clawed at his sanity. Sleep became an elusive luxury. Each time he closed his eyes, he found himself back on the yacht, its cursed corridors twisting and folding in on themselves, drawing him toward the Siren's waiting embrace. Signs of the Siren's reach. Daniel wasn't the only one affected. The harbor town itself began to feel the Siren's creeping presence. Fishermen spoke of nets coming up empty, their boats plagued by unexplained malfunctions. The once vibrant marina grew eerily silent, the usual camaraderie among sailors replaced by hushed conversations and darting glances. One by one, the boats stopped venturing out to sea, their captains refusing to risk the strange occurrences that seemed to follow Daniel's return. Then came the disappearances. A young deckhand vanished during the night, his bunk undisturbed and his belongings untouched. A seasoned fisherman was found adrift in his skiff, his eyes vacant and his lips murmuring an unintelligible tune. He died hours later, his body showing signs of advanced hypothermia despite the mild weather. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed they had seen the woman, her spectral figure standing at the end of the pier, her hair blowing in a wind that no one else could feel. Others spoke of hearing her song carried on the breeze, a melody so mournful it brought tears to their eyes. Daniel, consumed by guilt, became a pariah. The townsfolk avoided him, their whispers filled with accusations. He brought her here, they said. He's cursed us all. Seeking a final solution. Desperate to rid himself, and the town, of the Siren's grasp, Daniel sought out Dr. Meredith Klein once more. When he arrived at her cluttered office, her normally calm demeanor was replaced by a visible unease. "She's growing stronger," Klein said, pacing as she reviewed her notes. "The ritual you attempted disrupted her, but it didn't sever her connection. She's anchored to something more than just the music box." Daniel's heart sank. "What does that mean? How do we stop her?" Klein hesitated before answering. "To break the curse completely, you'll have to confront her again. But this time, you must understand what binds her to the Elysian Horizon. It's not just vengeance or sorrow, there's something deeper, something tied to the ship itself. The yacht isn't just cursed, it's her domain, a manifestation of her power. Destroying it might weaken her enough to sever the connection." The plan was daunting, but Daniel had no other choice. Klein provided him with a new ritual, one that required him to return to the yacht and uncover its darkest secret. Armed with candles, a ceremonial dagger, and a satchel of herbs, Daniel prepared for what he knew would be a final, perilous confrontation. The return to the Elysian Horizon. Under the cover of night, Daniel set out once more for the Elysian Horizon. The yacht's silhouette loomed in the distance, shrouded in an unnatural fog. The water around it was unnervingly calm, its surface reflecting the moonlight like a sheet of glass. As he approached, Daniel felt a familiar chill crawl up his spine. The air seemed to vibrate with the Siren's presence, her melody growing louder with each passing moment. Stepping aboard, Daniel was immediately struck by how much the yacht had changed. Its once pristine interior was now decayed and crumbling, as if decades had passed in the short time since his last visit. The walls were covered in strange, pulsating growths that oozed a dark, briny liquid. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay, and the distant sound of waves seemed to come from within the ship itself. Using the ritual instructions Klein had given him, Daniel began to set up his tools in the yacht's main cabin. He drew a protective circle of salt on the floor and placed candles at its points, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. As he recited the incantation, the air grew colder, and the Siren's song reached a deafening crescendo. Then, she appeared. A deeper truth revealed. The Siren materialized in the center of the room, her translucent figure more vivid than ever. Her hair moved like seaweed caught in a current, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. This time, she spoke. "You cannot free yourself," she said, her voice echoing as though it came from the depths of the ocean. "You are bound to me, as is this vessel. It is my prison, my sanctuary. To destroy it is to destroy me, and you." Daniel realized the horrifying truth. The Elysian Horizon wasn't just cursed, it was an extension of the Siren herself, a physical manifestation of her torment. The artifacts he had found, the music box, the compass, the locket, were fragments of her soul, pieces of her humanity that had been trapped when she became the Siren. If he destroyed the yacht, it wouldn't just weaken her, it would erase her entirely. But in doing so, he risked losing himself. The ritual required a sacrifice, a life offered willingly to sever the bond between the siren and the ship. As the siren's song grew louder, Daniel faced an impossible choice: surrender to her call and join her eternal prison, or destroy the yacht and risk his own soul in the process. The cabin was filled with a crushing stillness as Daniel faced the siren's translucent form. Her eyes, gleaming like fractured pearls, locked onto his. The room seemed to pulse with her sorrow, each beat pulling him further into the depths of her despair. The ritual was nearly complete, its incantations stirring the cursed energy around them. The yacht groaned beneath his feet, the wood splintering as the air filled with a strange hum. The line between the living and the spectral world blurred, and Daniel felt his grip on reality slipping. He clutched the ceremonial dagger tightly, his hand trembling not from fear, but from the weight of the decision ahead. "You still think you can escape me," the siren said, her voice echoing like waves crashing against jagged rocks. "But there is no escape. The sea claims all who dare challenge it." A choice revealed. As the final verse of the ritual spilled from Daniel's lips, the room shifted. The walls of the yacht dissolved, replaced by a swirling vortex of water and shadow. In its center, Daniel saw a strange object, a heart-shaped mass of glowing coral, pulsating with a dark, rhythmic energy. Dr. Klein's research hadn't prepared him for this. The coral wasn't just an anchor, it was the source of the siren's power, a physical manifestation of her pain and fury. If he destroyed it, the siren's hold on the world would shatter. But Klein had warned him, such an act would unleash a backlash of energy, one that could consume everything around it. The siren circled him, her form flickering between moments of ethereal beauty and monstrous decay. "You see it now, don't you?" she whispered. "My pain. My prison. And yet you would destroy it, destroy me, without knowing the full cost." Daniel hesitated. The weight of the dagger in his hand felt unbearable. He could end this nightmare here and now, but at what cost? Was there another way? The sirens passed. For the first time, Daniel truly looked at the siren. Beyond her anger and malice, he saw a woman consumed by grief. Her curse was not born of hatred alone, but of betrayal, despair, and the unrelenting pull of the sea. "This wasn't your choice, was it?" Daniel asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging around him. The siren's expression softened, her form stabilizing. "No," she admitted, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I was promised salvation, but I was cast aside. The sea was all I had left." Her confession stirred something in Daniel. He realized the ritual wasn't just about severing her bond to the yacht, it was about confronting the pain that bound her to the mortal world. If he could reach her humanity, perhaps he could end the curse without destruction. An act of redemption. Daniel stepped closer to the glowing coral, his voice calm but firm. "If I destroy this, I destroy you. But that doesn't have to be the answer. Let me help you find peace." The siren's form flickered, her expression torn between anger and hope. "You would risk your life for a chance to save me?" Daniel nodded. No one deserves to be trapped in their pain forever. He placed his hands on the coral, its surface cold and pulsing beneath his touch. Instead of striking it with the dagger, he closed his eyes and focused on the siren's song, the melody that had haunted him since his first step aboard the yacht. Slowly, he began to hum along, weaving his own voice into the tune. The siren gasped, her form stabilizing as the coral's glow softened. The vortex around them began to calm, its dark waters receding. The curse lifted. The ritual ended not with a violent explosion, but with a quiet stillness. The siren's form shimmered as she approached Daniel, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've given me something I thought was lost," she said softly. "Peace." With a final, haunting smile, the siren faded into the light, her presence dissipating like mist in the morning sun. The coral crumbled to dust in Daniel's hands, its energy released harmlessly into the air. The Elysian Horizon groaned one last time before vanishing beneath the waves. Daniel was thrown into the water, the icy cold shocking him awake. When he surfaced, the yacht was gone, and the horizon was clear. A quiet victory. Daniel returned to shore at dawn, exhausted but alive. The town, once plagued by the siren's curse, began to heal. The sea seemed calmer, its waves lapping gently against the docks as if to thank him. Though Daniel had survived, he bore the scars of his encounter, both physical and emotional. He carried the memory of the siren's song with him, a bittersweet melody that served as a reminder of her pain and his own resilience. He knew he could never fully escape what he had experienced, but he found solace in the knowledge that he had ended the cycle. The siren's story had reached its conclusion, and so had his role in it. Years passed since Daniel's final confrontation with the siren. The town where he had once lived, now thriving and untouched by the curse that had once plagued it, carried on as if the events had been nothing more than a bad dream. New ships arrived in the harbor, fresh-faced fishermen carried on their trade, and life seemed to have returned to normal. Yet for Daniel, peace was something he could no longer possess. The mountains where Daniel had taken refuge were quiet and distant, far removed from the sea's haunting whispers. Though he had walked away from the curse, a part of him, the part that had known the siren's sorrow and the depths of her tragic fate, remained lost. In the stillness of his isolated cabin, when the wind howled through the trees and the night stretched on forever, the faintest echoes of her song would rise, only to fade with the dawn. It was a song that would never leave him, a reminder of the price he had paid and the lives he had touched, even in passing. At times, Daniel wondered if the siren had truly found peace, or if her torment had only been shifted to another place, another soul. Perhaps, he thought, the sea was an eternal cycle, where love, loss, and vengeance were forever bound together in a melody that no one could escape. But he could not change what had been done. He had made his sacrifice, and in return, he had released the town from its curse. That was all he could offer. And so, Daniel lived out the remainder of his days in solitude. His heart, forever heavy with the weight of his choice, knew that the world would continue on, ever turning, with the ocean singing its ageless tune. But the siren's voice, whether real or imagined, would remain his to carry for the rest of his life. The end of Daniel's story is not one of complete resolution, but a reflection of the inescapable pull that the supernatural can have on the lives it touches. The sea, vast and eternal, holds many secrets, and while the siren may be gone, her song will live on in the hearts of those who have heard it, forever bound to the depths.